There's a moment that separates those who truly think from those who merely believe they think. A moment when someone stands at a crossroads between intellectual integrity and comfortable certainty, between genuine understanding and the seductive illusion of knowledge. It's a moment most people never even recognize because they've already made their choice, already committed to a path that feels like wisdom but is actually intellectual imprisonment. And the tragedy is not that they chose wrong. The tragedy is that they never knew there was a choice to make. This is the story of the one rule that determines whether you are genuinely thinking critically or simply performing the theater of critical thinking. It's the rule that separates authentic intellectual courage from sophisticated self-deception. It's the principle that, once violated, transforms even the most educated mind into a prisoner of its own biases, an echo chamber of its own assumptions, a fortress built not to protect truth, but to defend comfortable lies. And the most dangerous part is this: violating this rule doesn't feel like failure. It feels like certainty. It feels like confidence. It feels like finally understanding what others are too blind or too foolish to see. Critical thinking has become a buzzword, a credential people claim, a badge they wear to signal their superiority over those who supposedly believe without questioning. Everyone thinks they're a critical thinker. Everyone believes they're the one asking the hard questions, challenging the narratives, seeing through the propaganda. But the uncomfortable truth is that most people who identify as critical thinkers are doing nothing of the sort. They've learned the language of critical thinking. They've mastered the performance of skepticism. But they've missed the one essential element that makes critical thinking genuine rather than performative. That element is a single rule, one principle that must never be broken if thinking is to remain critical rather than devolving into rationalization, confirmation bias, and intellectual tribalism. This rule is simple to state but extraordinarily difficult to practice. It's so difficult, in fact, that most people violate it constantly while believing they're following it perfectly. It's so challenging that even acknowledging you might be breaking it feels like an attack on your intelligence, your judgment, your very identity. The rule is this: never protect your conclusions from scrutiny more than you protect the process of reaching conclusions. Or put another way, your commitment to finding truth must always exceed your commitment to being right. This sounds obvious. It sounds like something everyone would naturally agree with. But in practice, it's the rule that almost everyone breaks, almost all the time, in ways they never recognize. Because the moment we reach a conclusion we find satisfying, the moment we adopt a belief that aligns with our identity, the moment we take a position that signals our membership in a tribe we value, something subtle but profound happens in our minds. We stop genuinely evaluating evidence. We start defending a position. And we tell ourselves we're still thinking critically because we can articulate reasons for our beliefs. Because we can point to evidence that supports our position. Because we can identify flaws in opposing arguments. But critical thinking is not about being able to defend your position. It's about being willing to abandon your position when evidence and logic demand it. It's not about finding reasons to believe what you already believe. It's about subjecting your beliefs to the same rigorous scrutiny you apply to beliefs you oppose. It's not about winning arguments. It's about discovering truth, even when that truth is inconvenient, uncomfortable, or identity-threatening. The violation of this rule is so common, so pervasive, that we've developed an entire vocabulary to describe its various forms. Confirmation bias, motivated reasoning, identity-protective cognition, belief perseverance, the backfire effect. All of these are variations on the same fundamental error. Prioritizing the defense of conclusions over the integrity of the thinking process, and all of them are invisible from the inside. No one experiences themselves as engaged in motivated reasoning. They experience themselves as correctly evaluating evidence. No one feels their identity defensiveness distorting their judgment. They feel they're superior, insight allowing them to see what others miss. This is why intelligence and education offer no protection against this violation. In fact, they often make it worse. More intelligent people are better at generating sophisticated justifications for the conclusions they want to reach. More educated people have access to larger vocabularies, more complex frameworks, and greater rhetorical skill to defend their positions. They don't think better. They just defend worse, thinking more eloquently. They build more elegant cages for their own minds and call those cages knowledge. The one rule for critical thinkers is violated every time someone approaches new information with the question, how can I use this to support what I already believe? Rather than what does this actually tell me, even if it contradicts what I believe? It's violated every time someone applies skepticism asymmetrically, rigorously questioning claims they disagree with while accepting claims they agree with at face value. It's violated every time someone dismisses evidence because of its source rather than evaluating the evidence on its merits. It's violated every time someone's confidence in their position increases, despite encountering strong counterarguments, simply because they can generate rebuttals to those counterarguments. The rule is violated every time someone mistakes familiarity with truth. Every time they confuse the ability to articulate reasons with the validity of those reasons. Every time they interpret disagreement as evidence of others' ignorance, rather than as potential evidence of their own error. It's violated in the scientist who dismisses data that contradicts their theory, in the political partisan who can see the propaganda of the other side, but not their own, in the religious believer who demands evidence from skeptics while accepting their own beliefs on faith, in the skeptic who prides themselves on questioning everything except the frameworks through which they question. Understanding why this rule is so consistently violated requires understanding the psychological forces working against it. Human beings are not designed for dispassionate truth-seeking. We are designed for survival, for social cohesion, for the maintenance of our sense of self. And sometimes, perhaps often, these imperatives conflict directly with the pursuit of truth. Our beliefs are not just abstract propositions we hold about reality. They are integrated into our identity, our social networks, our sense of who we are and where we belong. Changing a significant belief doesn't just mean updating information. It means potentially disrupting relationships, losing community, questioning our own judgment, admitting we were wrong about things we confidently proclaimed. The psychological cost of being wrong is immense, and that cost creates a powerful unconscious motivation to avoid being wrong, which translates into protecting our conclusions from genuine scrutiny. This protection happens through mechanisms so subtle that we rarely catch ourselves engaging in them. The first mechanism is selective attention. We don't actively avoid information that contradicts our beliefs. We simply don't notice it as readily. Our attention is drawn to information that confirms what we already believe, that reinforces our existing frameworks. We remember it better. We find it more credible. We consider it more relevant. Contradictory information doesn't register with the same force. It's not that we're consciously ignoring it. It's that it doesn't light up the same neural pathways, doesn't trigger the same sense of significance, doesn't integrate into our understanding with the same ease. The second mechanism is differential evidence evaluation. When we encounter information that supports our position, we ask, can I believe this? We look for reasons to accept it, and if we find any plausible reason, we do. When we encounter information that contradicts our position, we ask, must I believe this? We look for any reason to reject it, and if we find one a methodological flaw, a questionable source, an alternative interpretation, we dismiss it. The standards we apply are asymmetric, tilted in favor of protecting our conclusions. The third mechanism is sophisticated rationalization. We are extremely skilled at generating plausible-sounding reasons for dismissing evidence we don't like. We can identify potential confounds, question methodologies, propose alternative explanations, point out conflicts of interest. These critical tools are essential for genuine evaluation. But when they're applied only to evidence we disagree with, they become weapons for defending predetermined conclusions, rather than tools for discovering truth. And because these rationalizations are genuinely sophisticated, because they draw on real critical thinking skills, they feel like critical thinking rather than like motivated reasoning. The fourth mechanism is emotional reasoning disguised as logic. We have emotional reactions to ideas. Some ideas feel right, feel true, feel noble. Others feel wrong, feel false, feel dangerous. These emotional reactions are not conscious assessments we make after evaluating evidence. They're immediate, intuitive responses that happen before conscious thought. But then we generate logical-sounding justifications for those emotional reactions. And we mistake those post hoc rationalizations for the reasons we believe what we believe. We think we believe because of the reasons we can articulate. But actually, we believe because of emotional responses we're not consciously aware of. And the reasons we articulate are just the story we tell ourselves about why we believe. The fifth mechanism is tribal epistemology. We unconsciously adopt beliefs that signal our membership in valued social groups and reject beliefs that would distance us from those groups. This isn't a conscious calculation. We don't think I'll believe this because it will help me fit in. Instead, beliefs that align with our tribal identity feel more plausible, more obvious, more true. Evidence supporting those beliefs seems stronger. Arguments against them seem weaker. And we genuinely experience this as superior insight rather than as social conformity. We think we're thinking independently. We're actually thinking tribally. Breaking the one rule and getting away with it, continuing to see yourself as a critical thinker despite protecting your conclusions from genuine scrutiny requires one additional element: applying your critical thinking skills outwardly rather than inwardly. This is the trap that catches almost everyone who identifies as a critical thinker. They develop sophisticated skills for identifying flaws in others' reasoning. They become experts at spotting logical fallacies, motivated reasoning, propaganda, and bias in the beliefs they oppose. And this skill at external criticism confirms their identity as critical thinkers. They see themselves as the questioners, the skeptics, the ones who won't be fooled. But genuine critical thinking requires turning those tools inward with the same rigor you apply outwardly. It requires being as skeptical of your own reasoning as you are of your opponents. It requires looking for flaws in your own arguments as diligently as you look for them in others. It requires treating your own beliefs as provisional and subject to revision rather than as established truths to be defended. And this is where almost everyone fails, because it's psychologically much more comfortable to see errors in others than to acknowledge them in ourselves. Following the one rule truly, prioritizing the process of thinking over the defense of conclusions requires developing several specific practices. The first is active hypothesis testing rather than passive evidence accumulation. Instead of asking what evidence supports my position, ask what evidence would prove my position wrong, and do I see any of that evidence? Instead of looking for confirmation, actively search for disconfirmation. This is unnatural. It feels like sabotaging yourself. But it's the only way to escape the trap of confirmation bias. The second practice is steelmaning rather than strawmaning. When you encounter an opposing position, resist the temptation to attack the weakest version of that position. Instead, construct the strongest possible version, the version that would be most persuasive to an intelligent, informed person. If you can defeat that strongest version, your position is more likely sound. If you can only defeat weak versions, you haven't actually tested your beliefs. You've just engaged in intellectual shadowboxing that creates the illusion of critical thinking without its substance. If this is resonating, if you're recognizing how easy it is to mistake the performance of critical thinking for the real thing, then you need to subscribe to this channel. We're building a community of people genuinely committed to intellectual integrity, not just tribal point scoring. People who understand that the hardest person to think critically about is yourself. Hit that subscribe button and join us in the difficult, uncomfortable, essential work of genuine truth-seeking. The third practice is intellectual humility expressed through probabilistic thinking. Instead of holding beliefs as certainties, hold them as probabilities. Instead of thinking I'm right and they're wrong, think I'm 70% confident in this position, 20% uncertain, and 10% open to the possibility I'm fundamentally wrong. This probabilistic framing makes it easier to update your beliefs as new evidence emerges. It reduces the psychological cost of being wrong because you were never claiming certainty in the first place. The fourth practice is deliberate exposure to strong counterarguments. Don't just read what your side says about the other side. Read what the other side says about themselves. Find the most intelligent, articulate advocates for positions you disagree with and genuinely engage with their arguments. Not to find flaws, not to generate rebuttals, but to understand. To see whether they might be seeing something you're missing. To test whether your confidence in your own position survives genuine engagement with its strongest critics. The fifth practice is monitoring your emotional responses to ideas. When you encounter a claim and your immediate reaction is strong emotional resistance or strong emotional acceptance, that's a signal that something other than pure rational evaluation is happening. It doesn't mean your conclusion is wrong. It means you need to slow down and examine why you're having that emotional response. Is it because the evidence genuinely compels that response? Or is it because the claim threatens your identity, contradicts your tribe's beliefs, or undermines a position you're invested in defending? The sixth practice is regularly changing your mind on significant issues and examining why you changed. If you never change your mind on anything important, that's not evidence that you've figured everything out. It's evidence that you're not genuinely engaging with evidence and arguments. It's evidence that you're protecting conclusions rather than following processes. Genuine critical thinking leads to belief revision because reality is complex. Because our initial understandings are always incomplete, because new evidence emerges. Track when you change your mind. Analyze what caused the change. This practice helps you recognize when you're actually thinking versus when you're just defending. The seventh practice is perhaps the hardest, being willing to hold positions that are socially costly. If all your beliefs align perfectly with your social group, if you never hold any positions that would make you unpopular with your tribe, that's almost certainly evidence that tribal epistemology is operating. Genuine independent thought inevitably produces some beliefs that contradict group consensus. If you never experience social friction from your beliefs, you're probably not thinking independently. You're probably using your intelligence to justify tribal loyalty. Violating the one rule has consequences that extend far beyond individual errors. When people protect conclusions rather than processes, dialogue becomes impossible. Debates devolve into dueling monologues, where each side is simply waiting for their turn to present their predetermined talking points. No one is listening. No one is genuinely considering alternatives. Everyone is just performing confidence in their position. This creates a society where consensus can only be imposed through power, never achieved through persuasion. because no one is genuinely open to persuasion. Everyone is just looking for ammunition to defend what they already believe. When institutions violate this rule, when universities, media organizations, scientific bodies, and political systems prioritize defending conclusions over maintaining process integrity, they lose their legitimacy. Science becomes scientism. Journalism becomes activism. Education becomes indoctrination. And the people who might have trusted these institutions start looking elsewhere for truth, often finding even less reliable sources. The crisis of institutional legitimacy we're experiencing is largely a crisis of violated process integrity, of conclusions protected from scrutiny, of questions deemed too dangerous to ask. When entire cultures violate this rule, when certain conclusions become so sacred that questioning them is treated as moral transgression, rather than intellectual exercise, those cultures become fragile. They lose the ability to course correct, to adapt to new challenges, to recognize when their established beliefs have become obsolete or destructive. They mistake rigidity for strength, certainty for wisdom, and unanimity for truth. And eventually, they collide with realities that don't care about their sacred conclusions. And the collision is catastrophic because they've lost the capacity to think their way through it. The one rule for critical thinkers is simple. Never protect your conclusions from scrutiny more than you protect the process of reaching conclusions. But simple does not mean easy. Following this rule requires constant vigilance against your own psychological tendencies, against the social pressures that push toward conformity, against the seductive comfort of certainty. It requires recognizing that your conclusions, no matter how carefully reached, are provisional, that your understanding, no matter how, is incomplete, that your confidence, no matter how justified it feels, might be unwarranted. This is not a call for radical skepticism or intellectual paralysis. It's a call for intellectual humility combined with rigorous process integrity. It's the recognition that the quality of your thinking process matters more than the specific conclusions you reach. Because a good process will eventually converge on truth, while a bad process will only produce confident errors. The irony is that following this rule often makes you less certain, less confident, more aware of complexity and ambiguity than those who violate it. This can feel like weakness. In a culture that values certainty, that interprets nuance as fence-sitting and humility as ignorance, following this rule can make you seem less impressive than those who speak with absolute conviction. But that impression is false. The person who acknowledges uncertainty is not weaker than the person who claims certainty. They're simply more honest about the limits of their knowledge. And in the long run, honesty about uncertainty produces more reliable beliefs than false confidence. Following this rule also requires courage. It requires the courage to change your mind publicly, to admit you were wrong, to revise beliefs you once defended. It requires the courage to hold positions that make you unpopular with your tribe. It requires the courage to say, "I don't know," when everyone else is claiming certainty. And it requires the courage to keep thinking, keep questioning, keep seeking truth, even when certainty would be more comfortable and conformity would be easier. But this courage is not just personally valuable. It's culturally essential. Societies need people who can think genuinely rather than tribally, who can update their beliefs rather than defending them indefinitely, who can engage with disagreement as an opportunity for understanding rather than as a threat to be defeated. These people are the immune system against ideological capture, the mechanism by which errors get corrected, the force that prevents collective delusion from becoming permanent. The one rule is not just about individual thinking. It's about collective sense-making. When enough people prioritize process over conclusions, when enough people remain genuinely open to evidence and argument, dialogue becomes possible. Persuasion becomes possible. Consensus, through understanding rather than through power, becomes possible, and societies can navigate complexity, adapt to change, and course-correct when they go astray. The choice to follow this rule is ultimately a choice about what kind of thinker you want to be. Do you want to be right, or do you want to discover truth? Do you want to defend your current beliefs, or do you want to replace those beliefs with better ones when evidence demands it? Do you want to feel certain, or do you want to be accurate? These seem like they should be the same thing, but they're often in direct conflict. And the moment you prioritize being right over discovering truth, the moment you protect conclusions over process, you stop being a critical thinker and become just another person performing the theater of critical thinking while engaging in sophisticated rationalization. The one rule is hard. It's uncomfortable. It's socially costly. It requires perpetual self-skepticism and intellectual humility. But it's also the only path to genuine understanding, to beliefs that actually reflect reality rather than just reflecting our biases, our tribes, and our need for comfortable certainty. And in a world drowning in confident errors, in tribal epistemology, in sophisticated propaganda masquerading as critical thinking, following this one rule might be the most revolutionary act available. If you're committed to genuine critical thinking, if you're willing to prioritize truth over tribal loyalty, if you understand that the hardest person to think critically about is yourself, then this channel is for you. Subscribe now and join a community of people genuinely committed to intellectual integrity, to rigorous self-examination, to the difficult work of following the process wherever it leads, even when it leads away from comfortable conclusions. We don't tell you what to think, we help you think better. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and take the first step toward genuine intellectual independence. Your transformation from performing critical thinking to actually practicing it starts here. Subscribe now.